When you mentioned aging population, I have a good example from Europe that only 2 countries on the entire continent are having enough babies to sustain their population level. That's Ireland and Portugal. So you imagine the pressure on the taxation system and the spending on those other countries that are not sustaining their population levels and are just getting older and older and older. Okay, let me look at the back as well if anybody has any questions. We've got about 7 minutes left. And please, make it a question, not a lecture, because if it's a lecture, I'll have to stop you. Gentleman over there and gentleman over here. Okay, please introduce, there's a microphone.
Thank you very much.
Doesn't work? Yeah, it does work.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question for Mr. Jeffrey Sachs. My name is Sarsin Anacır and I'm from Harici News. So you mentioned that we shouldn't look for a rationale behind the actions of Donald Trump, but just to be a devil's advocate, I just want to understand their point of view, which they mention, yes, trade deficit and the national debt of the United States, but also they mention the hard industries that left the United States back in the day. So what I'm trying to understand is, if United States gets into a confrontation with global powers such as China or Russia or any other state, maybe even Europe one day, is it wrong for them to want their hard industries back, and this is their rationale to put these tariffs on? Because Donald Trump mentioned that we are buying cars from Canada that we could have been producing before. So is there a rationale behind, at least on the hard industry part?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you know, in trade theory or trade concept, there is the national security rationale. So you may want to procure domestically to have an armaments industry. That's quite different from imposing tariffs on 150 countries in a completely arbitrary way. In fact, the right policy might be local procurement from domestic industry that has nothing to do with trade policy at all. So that is not an argument for what he's doing. But I would add one more point. We don't need an arms race and we don't need a war. Actually, diplomacy is really cheap compared to war. That's why we're at the Antalya Diplomacy Forum, not the Antalya Military Forum. So if Trump really wanted to save some money, we have almost 800 overseas military bases in 80 countries. This is crazy. So if he wanted to save money and close the budget deficit, I would close hundreds and hundreds of military bases and leave all these countries at peace, because wherever there's an American military base, there's a big headache, believe me.
Sir, okay, is your question to the finance minister? Is your question to the finance minister or to the professor? Because I want to even things up. I would come back to you if it was for the professor, but if you, okay, let's address it to the finance minister.
1, 2, 1, 2. My name is Rial Miller, formerly of the OECD, formerly of UNESCO, and formerly an advisor to finance ministers, so I can address my question to a finance minister. One of the things that's tremendously tempting, and it was really in part of what the last question was about, was the hard industries, right? So now let's go back to being an extractive economy. Coal mining, in Canada, I'm Canadian originally, beaver skins, right, that we sent over. So resources, right? Now, we have seen in the past, historically, when there was a move from natural resources to manufacturing, it was quite difficult for the society and the politics to change because the oligarchs of resources were not the oligarchs of manufacturing. So I have a question which relates to the historical context we're in. What if we're moving to intangible economies? What if we're moving away from tangibles in general, and those robots are going to take care of producing intangibles? How do we talk to people who are nervous and worried because they're accustomed? I go to Germany and I say, can Germany be rich without producing cars? And they go, oh, never. I said, well, could Britain be rich without producing coal? Never. And so we have this historical difficulty of making the transition. And I wonder what you can say in a country like Turkey, where you are making the transition through industry, and China through catch-up and convergence. But can we begin to talk about going beyond the tangible economy?
Of course, we can imagine, because if you look at the last couple of 100 years, there has been significant, trends. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, if you go back to 200 years ago, 90% of employment was in agriculture. Today, in developed West, it's about 1%, 2%. But we are much better off. So I think we can extrapolate. It's true that we may achieve artificial general intelligence soon, meaning within a year or two, and according to experts, maybe artificial superintelligence within 5 years. And assuming that also gets converted in robotics and advanced manufacturing, chances are the traditional employment will no longer be there. So we have to come up with so that's why I think, it seems like today's debate, considering what is ahead of us, a bit outdated. So I hear what you're asking, and it's really complicated. We all have to think. I remember attending a global economic symposium in Kiel back in 2007, and one of the sessions, because I was finance minister and treasury, they put me in that session, in that panel, and the question was, when do we start taxing robots? So, look, yes, I do see that happening. I don't have the answer, but certainly we have to think about it.
It'll be interesting to know if a robot will need a work permit as well, right? Okay, that's it. The time is up, ladies and gentlemen. It was always going to be too brief with these two particular gentlemen.